Hey, this is Mike McAdam from GenX Guitar. Today we're going to talk about how to set up a vocal microphone, so stick around. So welcome back to the channel. If you are enjoying this content, this is a reminder to please like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. So I was inspired to make this video because recently I spoke to a friend of mine that I've known for decades, and he was kind of getting back into music and wanted to record some vocal demos. So it was funny because he was so unfamiliar with how things worked now and needed a refresher of how to set up his vocal microphones and how to get signal. So I said I would help him out with that, and that inspired me to make this video. So hopefully it's helpful to some people out there. So what I want to do is today I am going to use this Beyer Dynamic M88 microphone as an example. So there's a lot of talk about what type of microphone you want to start off with. I find a lot of singers get tripped up on this. And yes, of course the microphone matters, but a lot of times the microphone is going to just capture what you put into it. So we're going to look at some other external factors that are going to help as well, but you just need something that's going to record your voice and hopefully do it well. I think later on, as you understand the process, then you can get a little more specific about what type of microphone you're using. Today, I have a Beyer Dynamic M88. This is an excellent, for some people, under the radar microphone. It's a dynamic microphone, and it's in what's called the Cardioid Pattern, which means it only takes signal of what is going into it, not from the sides or not in 360 pattern, which would be an Omni. So this is a pretty simple plug-in and play microphone, but it has been used many, many times in studios and on stages all over the world. So we're using this. I also have a condenser microphone here that we're not going to use, but I will use it as a demo to how to set it up. And I think there's a misnomer about condenser microphones. A lot of people make the assumption that a condenser mic is better because it's more of a full frequency microphone. I don't necessarily find that to be true. I think if you're looking dollar for dollar, you actually get a lot more value out of buying a dynamic microphone. Even though it might be limited, you do get, like I said, dollar for dollar, a little more bang for your buck. I've also found some condensers at a lower price point to be really noisy and very screechy sounding. So, of course, there are several you can check out, but I don't think you necessarily need to say, okay, a condenser's better, let's go with that. A dynamic mic will work fine for this application. So what I'm going to do now is I have my microphone already mounted on the clip. I think when you're recording vocals, it's really important to have some sort of pop filter or windscreen on the microphone. This basically prevents the mic from taking what are called plosives, which are like B and P sounds where you puh and pop the microphone. So this is going to help with that. I have this one from Blue Microphones. This one's a little pricier, but we found it to work really well here. People used to take homemade ones with a coat hanger and nylons and put those together, but there are several low-cost alternatives that can be found on Amazon. This is one of the things that's really going to help you in the beginning if you're recording and you don't want those plosive type sounds when you record. So here, what I'm going to do is just put it right on the microphone screen. And then once I have that set up, it's going to cover, the input part of the microphone. So an important thing is people will say, all right, how close do I get to the microphone? And of course, the more you back up, the more you're going to hear the sound of the room in your microphone. So when you're first starting out, you're probably not going to have your room treated, and it's not going to be what I would call friendly sounding. So one thing you can do is as you get closer to the microphone, you're going to minimize the sound of your room. But you don't want to get too close to it because, again, you're going to get those plosive sounds and the mic's going to jump all over the place. So a good rule of thumb is this. You basically put your hand on your nose and stretch it out like this. And this is about how close you want to get to the microphone to start off with. If you put your pinky on the filter and your thumb on your nose, that's going to be a good place to start as far as the distance that you want to be from the microphone. So it's a challenge recording yourself and worrying about the technical end of it and then worrying about the performance part of it. I find a little trick you can do is you can take a piece of tape Just put it at your feet so you know exactly where to line up to the microphone or any other object that might set you where you know you're in place the whole time. The next thing you want to take a look at is where do you want the microphone in proportion to your face. So a rule of thumb is typically you want to have the microphone between the top of your lip and the bottom of your nose. That's a good place to start. Of course, you can move it in other places, but that is an easy, works every time kind of setup for the microphone. So for these examples, I'm going to be sitting, and obviously if you're doing voiceover work or something where you don't need to stand, sitting down is totally fine. Just find a spot that's comfortable for you. But I imagine, if you're singing, most of you are going to be standing up. So whatever it takes to get comfortable doing that. Now, when you actually record into the microphone, if you look at this dynamic mic, it's pretty obvious where the input source is. Unfortunately, sometimes on condensers, I'll see people do this. They'll record into this end of the microphone. You typically want to go into this part of the microphone. If you're unsure about it, you can always tap the microphone once you get input and see where you're getting the strongest input to see where the sound is coming from. A quick note about most condenser microphones, they will typically have 2 or 3 patterns on them that are selectable. The primary ones are cardioid, which usually has a symbol that kind of looks like a heart on it. And that means the signal is just going into the front end of the microphone. You will have a figure 8 pattern on many of them. And that means the microphone is rejecting sounds from the sides, but you can go into the front end or the back end of the microphone. A lot of times people will use this if they're having 2 people sing on a microphone at once, or they're trying to get part of the room into the microphone or reject part of the room into the microphone. The third one that you'll typically see is what's called an Omni Pattern, and that means it's picking up sound from a 360-degree angle. So sometimes with this, I think especially with doing vocals, you want to use the cardioid because that will be the easiest one that rejects some of that room sound. Some of that room sound might sound appealing when you're first recording, but when you play it back, you'll start to hear some flaws in your room, and you can easily add some reverb in post to cover that up if you have a smaller room. Another note about condenser microphones, most of them require what's called phantom power or 48-volt charge to make the microphone work. So what you want to do is once you have the microphone set up, you want to engage that 48-volt switch. There's usually some indication, it'll say phantom or 48V on your interface that will activate the microphone. You definitely don't want to have this on with dynamic microphones as you can ruin the microphone. So be really careful about that. So one of the things we want to do is we want to really check the level of what is coming in. Now, a lot of times with singers, they tend to be very dynamic. You're going to have parts that are loud, parts that are soft. One thing that singers do that drives me absolutely crazy is they have a tendency on parts they want exaggerated to lean into the microphone and then go back for the other parts. If you have a passage that's really loud, you actually want to do the exact opposite. You want to pull back ever so slightly, so maybe 3-4 inches depending on what you're doing. So be really careful about that. I've seen a lot of singers, like I said, do the exact opposite, and you wind up clipping the microphone and it sounds less than pleasing. So what I want to do is when I'm checking the level on my microphone, I typically want it to come in at about minus 10 dB. That's going to give you enough headroom where if you have louder passages that naturally jump up, you're going to have enough signal in the file or the recording where it's going to be enough to drive it, but you're going to have enough headroom to where it's not going to clip it. So when I do that, again, I'm going to be about this far away from the microphone. And then if I read, I'm going to check that level and make sure it comes out okay. What I did was I took charge of myself, my own life, and that freaked people out who used to control me. Because so many people love to control others. Look at history. So with that example, I was coming in at around minus 10 dB, and I did move my head a bit. Generally, you want to stay as steady on the microphone as you can because even moving a couple of inches in either direction can drastically change the amount of input. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, comment below. In the meantime, we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.